After all the warnings, people are finally listening. Millions of people now are electing to stay away from these brand new cars. The evolution of the automobile means they're highly complex. You can't fix them yourself. And the decision to avoid some of these new cars in 2026, 2027 is a very conscious decision. They're trying to avoid being handcuffed by these dealers that are charging $250 an hour shop rate. Cars that you can no longer fix and diagnose yourself. And then with these car manufacturers bragging that their new latest and greatest cars are fully autonomous, that's quite the irony when we consider that you, the owner of the actual car, has lost all autonomy and the car now takes over control. You no longer control your car controls you. I want to talk about why this big shift and millions of buyers now are electing to just continue driving their old cars, forsaking all this new, latest and greatest technology. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
Shh. Do you hear that? That's millions of grumpy customers like me who are now looking at the evolution of the car industry and saying, how did we get here? I'm going to keep my old car because I can't afford to buy a new car. Not because the high increasing rates of these prices and the sticker prices that are giving you sticker shock that opens your eyes and drops your jaw. No, even at an average sticker price today of over $50,000, that's just the beginning of the end. That's what most people consider the small end of the wedge. See, because even if you can afford to buy that brand new car, the fact is most customers are realizing that they've lost control of their car. They can't afford to fix it because you can't DIY anything anymore. As a matter of fact, this goes back to a conversation that I've put on many years ago. I had an X5 diesel many years ago and I loved the car until I didn't. And there was a few things that started to become problematic. It was the EGR, DPF, diesel exhaust fluid, all those issues start to create all kinds of problems. If it was one thing, it was another. The DEF fluid, that would freeze up. There was a tank, it split, cracked. The problem was that was about $4,000 to fix. The bigger problem was that was a new technology that was forced on the consumer, like you and I. See, because 10 years prior to that, diesel engines were very simple. Put in diesel, high compression, compressed it, and they just cruised down the road. Yes, they puked out a little bit of dust and a little bit of carbon, but they were pretty dependable. Why? Because they were simple. And in many cases, you could fix these problems yourself. You could pull an injector, you could replace it, and Bob's your uncle, you could move on. But since then, things have vastly become far more complex. Cars these days have evolved. Even 10 or 15 years ago, cars were quite simple. V6 engines, V8 engines. Very few cars had turbos unless they were a high-performance car, one of those special one-off editions. I think of the Mazda RX-7 twin turbo or the 300ZX twin turbo back in the day. They had an extra level of performance, but you sort of signed up for that. You kind of knew what you were getting. High performance probably came at a cost of longevity. But as the time goes on, what we're seeing is this evolution of the industry that's pushing customers down an avenue that they don't want to go. Cars now, virtually almost every car is turbocharged. But instead of that V6 engine, now they're coming out with a turbocharged 3-cylinder engine. But guess what? Just when you thought that was bad enough, many of these manufacturers started introducing direct fuel injection. Product now, of course, of efficiency, and now a lot of these mandates are coming out in a way that's pushing a lot of these car manufacturers to create products that are using less fuel and creating less emissions. But I think we all know the result of that. In a lot of cases, they claim it's using less fuel. But in a real-world study, there's been many studies shown that a lot of these new turbocharged 4-cylinder engines, while bragged up to be more fuel efficient, are getting maybe 1, possibly maybe even only 2 miles per gallon better than their previous V6 counterparts. Look at products like Mercedes-Benz, the old C300 versus the new C300. The new C300 as a turbocharged 2-liter engine has been known to be somewhat problematic in some cases. The older C300, naturally aspirated V6, very durable, very robust. And the fuel economy wasn't really that much different. So what are we doing all of this for? It feels like there's some underlying issue, but people are starting to pay attention. Millions of people are paying attention. I've woken up and I've noticed this myself. Because now what we're seeing is the ability, or let's just put it this way, the forcefulness of many of these OEMs making the consumer, essentially pushing the consumer into a corner that you have no choice but to take your car to the dealer. The dealer is the only one that can troubleshoot and diagnose your car now, because you're getting locked out. We've seen countless videos of where many of these independent YouTubers have gotten their hands on a car, try to rebuild it, and lo and behold, they're stranded. Why? Because they don't have the rights, the access. They can replace all of the components, batteries, motors, water pumps. They can do all of those repairs. They can even weld and put new body panels on. But push come to shove, when it goes for that reset, because the car is spitting out all kinds of faults and says, nope, you have this condition, you now no longer have the ability to do a quick reset and be on your merry way. You can replace all the hardware. You can replace those hybrid batteries. You can do all of the work that the dealers would do up until you have that gateway. That's right, the gateway, the access, is a lock. It's a software lock. And a lot of us just now are starting to feel the pain. We're seeing it all over the place with countless YouTubers, countless manufacturers that are seemingly putting these software locks in place to prevent you to be able to just service your car, maintain it, and repair it as needed. But rather, now you're being forced down the avenue of paying high shop rates, $200 to $300 an hour rate, exorbitant price tags related to some of these parts. Third-party parts are no longer likely going to be available. And really, you're restricted to go exclusively to the dealer. On top of it, we look at a lot of the evolution of the car industry now. It's pushing a lot of people down to hybrids. I mean, just look at the likes of Toyota, Lexus, and many others now are focused very exclusively on moving down either pure electric or hybrid drivetrains. Now, plug-in hybrids does offer you up a convenience. You're not necessarily tethered, but the battery doesn't come cheap either. And you can expect thousands of dollars probably at that 7 to 10 year mark. When that battery starts to show degradation, it doesn't charge as well. And we've heard the stories. Charging too quickly, charging too slowly, high temperatures, low temperatures. These are all factors that are wearing out these batteries on these plug-in hybrids, and even worse, these pure electric vehicles. Ask yourself why many of these car manufacturers are retracting from building some of these electric vehicles. Because nobody's buying them. See, millions of people have been starting to pay attention. They've been starting to recognize that, wait a minute, after 10 or 11 years, when that battery no longer works, like your cell phone, you have this cell phone, that battery, after 3 or 4 years, it doesn't hold the charge the same. As a matter of fact, even if it does, it won't get you through the day like it did when it was brand new. Well, the same thing's likely going on with the cars. And the sad reality is people are starting to recognize putting two and two together. It's not about necessarily these cars burning by the roadside or having inadvertent combustions or these park outdoor orders that a lot of these OEMs are suggesting because the cars have a recall now due to a potential for a catastrophic battery failure and a fire on your driveway. It has nothing to do with those incidentals because, let's be honest, the fires in these cars burning are a relatively small number. The bigger issue is after 10, 11, 12 years, when you're faced with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 battery swap, that's when that gets real. And it's not even that. Many people say, hey, I drive a high-end Lamborghini and the car's worth $350,000. And you know what? After 10 years, if I have to put a battery in there for 30 grand, who cares? The car still has value. That's great. Unless you're driving an everyday car like the mass majority of the market. Most people just driving their day-to-day cars, getting to work, to school, realizing the only thing on the market left are plug-in hybrids, regular hybrids, and pure EVs. We know the mandates are pushing people to buy pure EVs. They want zero emissions, allegedly, by 2035, virtually in almost every country in the Western world. So where does that leave the consumer? Forced to buy that type of car. Why? Well, because that's the mandates, the governments, the pressures. There's pressures from every corner, forcing these manufacturers to create products that are zero emissions or low emissions. But in the meantime, what we're hearing is landfills potentially starting to fill up. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface on where all these batteries are going. Sure, while these refurb companies that say that they can overhaul a battery and get it turned around, not everything lands up in the landfill. But the fact is many do. And eventually, when this becomes a lagging effect, and you think 10 years, 15 years down the road, all these mass amounts of batteries on the market are eventually going to be a landslide of problems. The kind of problems that the customers really didn't even see coming, didn't anticipate, and quite honestly, once it happens to them, they won't want any part of that. See, as a matter of fact, it's not just those problems. It's the problems with these small little direct injection turbocharged fuel injected engines that are running hot, burning melting plastics. Turbocharged 4 grand, direct injected fuel injectors. It's no longer just a port fuel injector that might cost you $300 to replace. Now these are embedded right into the head of the engine. And I've heard countless problems with these injectors snapping off. It's not a DIY job anymore like a lot of the old projects. Now direct fuel injection, pretty much a dealer only thing. Turbochargers, usually buried so far under the hood that you're going to want to be either a seasoned mechanic or take it to the dealer. A lot of the reprogramming and resetting of codes, you're going to need the dealer. I mean, just look at John Deere. John Deere's a classic example of where allegedly recently they lost a little bit of a financial lawsuit, so to speak. Why? Because farmers were up in arms. They had this new expensive equipment. They were promised to have all this support. They could dial in remotely and reset and diagnose your equipment remotely, and it would give you a quick turnaround. Now, many have said that John Deere and companies like that are doing a great job. The fact remains is there are many cases where farmers and those types of folks are not able to do a field fix. They may have to wait for parts. Parts may need to be ordered in, and there might be an intentional delay. The worst part is that's their bread and butter. See, driving your tractor in harvest time means that thing running 24/7 until the job's done. The problem is the tractor breaks down and now you need a part. What happens? You can't diagnose it, you can't field fix it, and sometimes you're waiting for parts. Well, that's going to be the same situation with a lot of these cars. Now, this isn't about screaming bloody chaos, but this becomes a more and more evolutionary problem. So no longer buying a car is a once and done affair. Many manufacturers realize that they can tether you, the consumer, to their network, their service network, and their parts network. Why and how? Well, it all starts with subscription services. We've heard BMW one of the initiators of this. Subscription services might cost you $15 a month for your heated seats. Maybe you got to pay another $8 a month for your navigation. Possibly you've got to activate another feature within the car for another $12.99. The worst part is all of that hardware, modules, wirings already included. So how is it that they're able to do this? Well, they write it in their software in such a way that you can't operate that unless you unlock that software patch, unless you pay that bill, that monthly subscription fee, and then they'll open the gates on that feature. Now we're seeing more and more of this, and of course there was a lot of backlash, and BMW allegedly sort of backed off on some of that. But it still is sneaking in. We're hearing General Motors and many manufacturers like that now saying, you know what, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, try to push those products out, saying, look, but we'll provide our own in-house systems. The new type systems that sort of guarantee that your subscription dollars are going to go directly into their pockets. See, a lot of these manufacturers are creating new sources of revenue. It's no longer just sell you the car and then hopefully you'll come back for the regular oil changes and maybe you'll stop in the parts department to see Uncle Bob over there to get the new starter, or maybe your parts to change your oil, you need a new filter and another air filter and an oil filter. It's not just about starting in the parts and checking in at the service department. It becomes much bigger than that. It's a guaranteed mode of operation and it's a guaranteed revenue stream for a lot of these manufacturers. That means the creativity of the dealers and the OEMs is absolutely astounding. When they hit you with subscription services, you really don't have other options. There was a time when the dealers really only had a couple places to generate revenue. The initial sale of the car, make a few thousand there. If they took financing, depending on the finance rates, they might make another couple thousand there. And of course, they hope that you come back for service. And really, it's more about offering the loyalty, operating, giving the big smile and the concierge service, giving you that cup of Java as you walk in and giving you the big smile and hoping all of that beautiful, the big smiles are enough to get you to come back and spend your hard-earned dollars in the service department. But we've also seen a strong build out of a lot of the third party, the small independent shops that operate in their back alleys because they operate on a lower hourly rate. They can sometimes get jobber parts. They're creative in their own way, and you talk to the mechanic themselves. That gives you a freedom and an autonomy in your own vehicle that you can't find in a dealer network. Have you ever, the last time you've taken your car into a dealership, tried to talk to and understand really what's going on? All you are is talking to an interface. You might as well talk to an AI robot, because half of the time, these service advisors don't know their schwanz from a hole in the ground. A lot of times, they're just giving you gibberish transferred from 3 different voices, from the mechanic to another mechanic to a supervisor to somebody else, and paperwork trail, and then what they read on the write-up on the invoice. And sometimes there's some things lost in translation, and ultimately you, talking to the service advisor, you don't get the whole story. You cannot, on 99% of the time, even talk to the mechanic and understand really what they were dealing with, what they found, and what the issue was. Rather, you're talking to somebody who's making $15 an hour at the front end, just saying, hey, you need a new set of struts. Yeah, you really don't have the control. But the service and parts were yet another aspect of where these dealers were generating revenue. The unfortunate part is we also know that there's more to this equation, and there wasn't 10 or 15 years ago. See, what's new in this whole game and what's new in this whole conversation is a different conversation. You've heard about these maintenance plans, right? They'll give you a 5-year, a 7-year free maintenance plan. Sometimes it's included in the sale price of the vehicle. Sometimes they'll sell it for a song and a dance. But see, what you don't realize as the consumer is it's not just about that free 7-year maintenance plan or that free 5 years maintenance plan. What it also includes is the fact that your car only has a 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty. So they go and put 2 years on as a maintenance plan. But you'll find during that first 3 years, nothing's found. The car's great. Here's your keys, sir. There's your oil change. Thanks again. We'll see you in 6 months. That's how it generally would operate. But after 3 years is up, warranty's gone. Next thing you know, you're rolling into year 4 and 5 of maintenance. Well, you're looking to yourself, you're thinking, hey, I have free maintenance. Let's use it. So you go in there for your next oil change and you're going to do tire rotation. They're going to check everything over. And it's funny how this works, because the vast majority of the time, once warranty's gone, that's when they start digging in. That's when they start pulling out the punches. That's when all of a sudden, wait a minute, hang on now. Your brakes are at 30%. You've got yourself a leak at the cam housing and the timing chain cover's got a weep too. As well, there's a bit of a knock and it seems like the car's not running on all 6. Maybe we should do a diagnostic on this. And so next thing you know, you go from a place where 3 years, you're good. And then that last second, that 4th and 5th year, all of a sudden, lo and behold, there's an opportunity for a dealer to generate more revenue by finding more problems. This isn't by accident, it's by design. You'd ask yourself, if you're so confident with your maintenance of 5 years, why don't you give me a 5-year warranty? But they don't do that. They go out beyond that because they know that rule of thumbs and averages means that, of course, cars age and they deteriorate, but also it gives them the ability to start opening the checkbook, your checkbook. And many home DIYers say, okay, that's fine. For the big complex stuff, I'll take it to the dealer. And for the small stuff, oil changes and brake services, I can do that myself. That's simple work, not really all that mechanical, and I can take care of that. Guess what? Have you heard of some of those electric vehicles now where to do the rear brakes, you need the software, which is owned and operated by the dealer, to release the rear brakes? As a matter of fact, even our old Mercedes C300, it also has a release on the rear brake that you have to force the computer to release the park brake. If you don't and you try to remove the caliper, you'll break parts and it'll cost you thousands of dollars. It's almost a little bit of a booby trap, and they know that. And people are quite often intimidated, even if they know how to bypass and defeat some of these extra features. The point is there's a layer of complexity that never used to exist. What wrong with a pull handle for your park brake? No, now everybody's using electric park brakes and there's extra solenoids and motors and complexity that a lot of people simply don't want to take the chance or the risk. Rather, they default just going to the dealer. So again, it's holding you by that tether to the service department. But there's more to this conversation. Now, millions of people are starting to see this fact that you're tied to the dealer, huge shop rates, you can't reset codes, you can't even replace a battery without having it reset by the dealer. There's so many limitations now. On top of it, in 2027, there's a new mandate that's going to be monitoring you. watching your eye movements, watching your every maneuver, determining whether you're fit for driving. And many people have suggested that these mandates, it's another small end of the wedge. Starts off with the conversation, well, it's for safety. Make sure you're not intoxicated. But many people do expect that to expand out and making decisions as to whether you're capable of driving or not. See, the cars are losing the independence, and the owners are losing the independence of driving independently, making our own decisions to drive. And now, a lot of these computers and cars and OEMs are creating an environment where you're hands off. The car is fully autonomous, but you've lost all of your autonomy. See, this is the way the industry's trending. People are starting to look at this and say, wow, my car's spying on me, spying on my passengers. That's not cool. As a matter of fact, Ford even reached out for a patent to self-repossess. So if you were one of those people that, couldn't make your payments and after a couple consecutive months, you sort of defaulted, there's a patent which they have not yet initiated. It's not in the works yet, but they want to lock down on the idea that this vehicle would drive itself either off your lot onto the street so it could be easily picked up by a tow truck, or it would find its way all the way down to the auction house or back to its home base so that it can be retrieved and sold to the bank. See, these are some of the new technologies that are in place. The autonomy of these cars today is gone. Sheer and simple. Cars you can no longer fix. They're too complex, too expensive when they start to break. The plastics, they melt. And many people assume that automotive engineers aren't as smart as they used to be. I mean, cars never used to melt under the hood. Cars never leaked in certain ways. We never had carbon fouling. So how could it be that engineers are getting dumber? Well, the fact is they're not. They know their limits. And that's the problem. They're getting smarter than ever. They're understanding with life cycles, bathtub curves, infant mortality. They know the lifespan of the vehicle. They know the lifespan of individual components like water pumps, how many miles, how many cycles of that button, that switch, that knob. Hence why they're also including all of these big panels, because it's now a modularity that's just easy. Now, instead of selling you a little resistor or a little component or a switch, if your screen goes, instead of selling you that $22 switch, they can sell you the whole assembly that's plug and play, but it's going to cost you $3,800. They don't care if it's just one little element of that decided to stop working. They're going to sell you the whole 9 yards. Many of these cars now are bragging that the engines are very modular by design. I mean, even BMW, and granted, some of their modular engines are vastly improved from some of their older vehicles. The bottom line is, even with Porsche, for example, with the M96 engine, was considered to be more of a integrated dry sump or almost a modular type engine, whereby it was very interchangeable and it could be swapped out and in. As a matter of fact, the old engine builders from many years ago by even Porsche, many of those engine builders are going away. And from what I can tell, many of these Porsches now often use more of a modular design, and the engines really aren't all that feasible to rebuild. It's really more of a conversation about just getting the replacement engine, dropping that in for another $28,000, and you're on the road. There was a time when you had burnt valve guides or a burnt valve that you could just rebuild the top end. And sure, while there are some creative third-party folks out there and some great do-it-yourselfers that are willing to take on those challenges, the fact is these engines aren't built like they used to be, and they're built in a very tight, compounded, and modular way that it sort of forces your hand. You have to make a tricky decision. On a car that's depreciated so aggressively, now it's time to throw away the whole car, or a car that's only worth 20 grand, but it costs $28,000 to put a new engine. What's the decision you're going to make? That's right, because with all of these new technology, it's very quick and easy to dissipate the value of a lot of these cars. I mean, a lot of these components, you replace 1 or 2 or 3 modules in a modern day car, and now due to the heavy depreciation on these new tech cars that are turbo 3s and 4s that happen to have 100,000 miles on it, the car is depreciated so far, by the time you have 1 or 2 semi-catastrophic failures, the car is clearly past the point of repair. It doesn't matter anymore. And many people are just scrapping a 6 or 7-year-old car just because some of the repairs involved were relatively minor or could have been based on cars' designs of 10 years ago. But the severe cost of a module or a console or component or even a DCT transmission or even a CVT transmission in a modern Nissan that could cost $8,000 when your Nissan Sentra is only worth $5,500 quickly makes a decision much easier to make, and the owners decide to toss it. See, it's these complex designs, overabundance of technology just has a lot of people making decision. I'd just rather keep my old car. So now, herein lies the decision. Have you looked around the quality of used cars? Junk. That's right. Why? Because anything good worth owning, reputable brands, manufacturers, Acura, Lexus, Toyota, Honda, Mazda, you name it, the well-known reputable manufacturers, the only ones you'll find on the used car market are extremely high mileage or smashed and bashed, or they've got a bad, ugly history to them. Those are the only ones you find. Good luck in trying to find yourself a 9 or a 10-year-old Toyota Camry that's lovingly owned by some 82-year-old lady, and now she's just trying to sell it. And you know what? She's selling it with, 60,000 miles on it, and it's been purely serviced at the dealer. That type of gem is few and far between. Now, instead, the only thing you're finding on the market is just something beat up, rusted, or it has a severe accident history. See, because why? People are recognizing, millions of people are recognizing what's going on in the industry. And the simple fact is, more and more people are electing to even rebuild the engine in their old 15-year-old car, truck. I can't tell you how many old pickup trucks I see on the road, rusted out fenders. Why? Do they like driving rust? No, but they don't want to pay $90,000 for a truck with an engine in it that's likely going to need an overhaul before 60,000 miles is up. So they're saying, why would I spend six figures for a new truck when all I have to do is put 8 or 9 grand into a rebuilt engine in here? So yeah, it has a little rust around the fenders, and people are getting creative and putting those bolt-on fender flares to kind of hide rust for a few more years. Wheel bearings go. They spend $1,000, put a new front end on the car or the truck, and Bob's your uncle. See, even an old Honda CR-V, Toyota RAV4s, Toyota 4Runners, Camrys, Corollas. These are all examples, even Mazda 3s. These are all examples of cars that people want to get their hands on. And they're okay with buying a 4Runner with 250,000 kilometers because it has a naturally aspirated V6 from a generation back in 2008 and 2010 when those lasted 1,000,000 kilometers. People didn't care. And as long as the body looked good, they were willing to drive that car and take a chance. And it was an easy chance to take because many of those older cars didn't have turbos. Many of the older cars didn't have direct fuel injection. Many of the older cars were OBD2 compliant. You could plug in your old code reader, fix it yourself after a quick diagnostic, and move on. And then drive it for another 200,000 kilometers. See, things have changed, and the evolution of the automotive sector has people starting to figure out what's going on. Many people don't want to drive around in a vacuum cleaner with a battery in it that's going to need a $20,000 replacement in 10 years when that vehicle is only worth $8,000. It doesn't make sense, and people are starting to wake up. People are also starting to identify that these overarching costs, just everything that you have to do to the car, means you're tethered to the dealer service department. $200, $225 an hour shop rate, you betcha, all day. Now you start to think it's not about affording the price of these new cars, even with the high escalating price, $50,000, $52,000 average transaction price today. That's just the small end of the wedge. The big price is the next 10 to 15 or 20 years of that vehicle, if it even lasts. Good luck. People are getting wise. Millions of buyers are starting to say, I'm going to fix what I've got. And I like my old reliable Toyota, my old reliable Honda, my old reliable car, Lexus, Acura, because I can fix it. The dealer doesn't own me, the car doesn't own me, and I'm just going to keep on driving. Please do drop a line. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And again, as always, a couple of videos, more food for thought. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.